Only 7 people were in that room. 7 people who, for decades, refused to talk about it publicly. Not out of shame, not out of fear, out of something rarer than both: pure, stunned reverence. The year was 1967. The city was Los Angeles, and what happened inside that private gymnasium on a Tuesday afternoon in October would never appear in any newspaper, any magazine, any official record of either man's life. No cameras, no journalists, no contracts. Just 2 legends, 1 question, and an answer that took less than 4 seconds to deliver. This is the story they buried. You have to understand who these 2 men were in 1967, not as legends, not as myths, but as living, breathing forces that the world was still trying to comprehend. Muhammad Ali was 27 years old. He had already beaten Sonny Liston twice. He had demolished Floyd Patterson so thoroughly that the ringside physicians considered stopping it before Patterson's pride would let them. He had stood before the entire United States government, looked the draft board in the eye, and said no. He was 6 feet 3 inches of the most precisely engineered fighting machine in the history of professional boxing. His hands moved at documented speeds that coaches and trainers could barely process on film. Ali didn't walk into rooms, he arrived in them. He had a gravitational field. People leaned toward him. Cameras found him automatically. And when he spoke, even casually, even quietly, the air in any space changed temperature. He was also, in October of 1967, the most controversial man in America. The government had stripped him of his boxing license. They had taken his passport. They had attempted to erase him from the sport entirely. But you cannot erase a force of nature with paperwork. What they had actually done was give Muhammad Ali something more dangerous than a title belt. They had given him time. Time to think, time to train, time to sharpen. So there he was, suspended, restless, coiling, when a mutual friend suggested a meeting with a 26-year-old martial arts instructor from Oakland who was starting to make noise in ways that didn't fit into any existing category. That man was Bruce Lee. Now understand what Bruce Lee was in 1967. He was not yet a global superstar. He was not yet the face on a billion posters. He was still, to most of the American public, a novelty, the Chinese kid who played Kato on the Green Hornet, the one who moved a little faster than he should be able to, the one who seemed, if you watched closely enough, to be operating by a different set of physical laws. He stood 5 feet 7 inches. He weighed, depending on the day, somewhere between 130 and 145 pounds. He had arms that looked almost thin in a dress shirt, a waist that made him look like someone's lean, quiet cousin at a family dinner. And he was, without any reasonable doubt, the most dangerous, unarmed human being alive. Not because of mysticism, not because of movie magic, but because of something far simpler and far more terrifying. Bruce Lee had dedicated every waking hour of his life to a single obsession. Not performance, not display, not the appearance of fighting. Actual combat. He had stripped away everything decorative from every martial art he had ever studied, and he had studied all of them, and kept only what worked in the space of a real second against a real opponent with real intent. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. The idea was almost too clean to be revolutionary. Don't wait, don't react, intercept. Hit the thought before it becomes the punch. He trained his reflexes to operate below conscious thought. He trained his 1-inch punch until it could send a 200-pound man sliding backward across a floor with no visible wind-up. He trained his flexibility until his kicks landed above 6 feet from a standing position. He trained his speed until, on certain high-speed film tests conducted by his students, his strikes were literally invisible at 24 frames per second. They had to slow the film down to see the hit. Think about that.
So here was the moment history forgot to record. The mutual friend, a trainer who worked with both men and whose name has been withheld from every account that has surfaced over the years, invited them both to use a private gym in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles. The stated purpose was vague: a workout, an exchange, two exceptional athletes in the same space, which in itself was interesting enough. What nobody admitted until later was that the meeting had a subtext. Ali had seen footage of Bruce Lee on the Green Hornet. He had watched it the way Ali watched everything, analytically, competitively, with the quiet intensity of a man who understood superiority in physical performance better than almost anyone on earth. And his reaction, reportedly, was laughter. Not cruel laughter, not dismissive exactly, but laughter that contained a question. What would that actually do against a real fighter? It was a fair question. It was the question everyone was asking. The difference was that Ali was in a position to get an answer. Bruce knew why he was there. Bruce always knew why he was there.
The gym was a converted warehouse space, industrial ceiling fans that moved the air without cooling it, heavy bags along one wall, the leather dark and cracked from years of use, a canvas mat in the center, off-white, the edges curling slightly, fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency you felt in your back teeth. There were 7 people total: the mutual friend, 2 of Ali's training associates, 2 of Bruce's students. Dan Inosanto was reportedly one of them, though he has never confirmed or denied the account in full, and 1 additional observer, whose identity has never been confirmed, described only as a large man in a dark jacket who never moved from his position near the door. Ali arrived first. He wore a gray tracksuit and white boxing shoes. He was loose, comfortable. He filled the center of the room the way a great white fills the center of a tank, not aggressively, not even consciously, just inevitably. He shadowboxed in place, barely warming up, the combinations so fluid they looked like water. He spoke to the room generally, warming it the way he warmed every room. He was funny. He was gracious. He made everyone laugh twice in the first 5 minutes. And then Bruce Lee walked in. The contrast was almost theatrical. Ali was a cathedral. Bruce Lee was a blade. Where Ali moved in large, warm, sweeping gestures, Bruce moved in stillness, deep, controlled, watchful stillness that was somehow more active than motion. He shook hands quietly. He said little. He observed everything. His eyes were the thing people always mentioned first when they tried to describe meeting him. Not intensity, exactly. Something cooler than intensity. Something surgical. He looked at you the way a professional chess player looks at a board, not emotionally, not aggressively, but with absolute clarity about where every piece was and what every piece could do. Ali felt it. You could see the moment Ali felt it, a barely perceptible recalibration behind his eyes. The grin remained, the ease remained, but something behind it sharpened. He was for the first time in that room, paying full attention. They talked for 40 minutes before anything happened. This is the part that gets lost when people tell this story quickly. They reduce it to the fight, but the conversation was the story. Ali asked about the kicks, direct, genuinely curious, not mocking. Ali was too intelligent to mock what he didn't understand. He asked how practical the high kicks were against a moving opponent. He asked about reach disadvantage. He asked the questions a master boxer would ask. Bruce answered each one with the same quiet economy. Short sentences, precise language, the occasional demonstration that required no elaboration. At one point, Ali watched Bruce perform a series of trapping combinations on a pad held by Inosanto and didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he said, "That's fast," not as a compliment, as data. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It shifted the way it shifts in a documentary about deep ocean creatures, the moment the camera finds something it didn't expect to find and doesn't entirely know what it is. One of Ali's associates laughed and said something to the effect that Bruce was fast for a small guy. He said it gently, the way people say things gently when they want to make a point without appearing to make a point. Ali didn't laugh. Bruce didn't respond. He just turned slightly and looked at the man who had spoken. Not threatening, not cold, something more unnerving than either, utterly calm, the way a loaded weapon is calm. The man stopped laughing. Somewhere around the 45-minute mark, the conversation arrived at the edge of the thing everyone in the room was thinking about, but no one had said directly. Ali said it directly. He looked at Bruce Lee, and the room remembered this clearly because of how he said it, without performance, without theater, with genuine and unaffected curiosity. And he said, "What would you do against me? Seriously. You can't kick a moving man in the head if he doesn't want you to. I don't stay still. And you can't punch through a guard like mine with a 130-pound body behind it. So what would you actually do?" It was a real question. The room understood it was a real question. And for a moment, just a moment, Bruce Lee was quiet. Not uncertain, not calculating, simply giving the question the respect of actual consideration before he answered it. Then he said something that no account fully agrees on, but which is consistently described in spirit. He said something close to this: "You'd never let me get to your head. I wouldn't try. You'd stop my cross if you saw it coming, so I wouldn't let you see it coming. You are the fastest heavyweight in the world, but heavyweight is a weight class. Fast is a category. I'm in a different category." Ali stared at him. The room was quiet. Then Ali smiled, wide, genuine, the real one, not the performance smile, and said, "Okay, show me." What happened next was described differently by everyone who witnessed it, not because they're lying, because the human mind genuinely struggles to process events that occur at the speed Bruce Lee operated. The brain fills in gaps with the nearest available logic. The nearest available logic is usually wrong. Here is what the accounts agree on. Ali assumed his stance. Classic. Educated. The most refined defensive boxing posture in the world. Left hand high, right hand cocked. Weight distributed with the geometric precision of a man who had spent 10 years perfecting every millimeter of it. He wasn't performing.
The next moment lasted longer than the 4 seconds before it. Ali slowly lowered his guard. Not in defeat. Ali's body didn't know the language of defeat, but in something more complicated, something that lived in the space between pride and revelation. His jaw moved slightly, the way a man's jaw moves when he is processing something he did not expect to process. He looked at Bruce Lee with new eyes, not different eyes, new ones, the kind he bro in a single moment when the world shows you something it hid from you until just now. One of Ali's associates started to say something. Ali held up one hand without looking at him. The associate stopped. Ali said quietly to no one in particular and to the room in general, "He's not fast for his size." A pause. "He's just fast." This is where section 1 ends, and where the real story begins. Because the next thing that happened in that room was not another exchange. It was not a rematch. It was not an argument or a negotiation of pride. It was a conversation, a long one. A conversation that, by every account of those 7 witnesses, lasted nearly 2 more hours. And when 2 of the greatest physical minds of the 20th century sat on the edge of that off-white canvas mat and talked about speed, about stillness, about the space between intention and action, about what it really meant to be dangerous, about what it meant to be fast in a world that rewards only the appearance of speed, about what fighting actually was, stripped of every sport, every rule, every crowd. What happened in that conversation, what Ali admitted, what Bruce revealed, what each man took from the other, is the second half of this story, and it is in many ways the more devastating half. He was ready, genuinely ready. The people in that room were not watching a movie. They understood what Ali's stance meant. It meant the conversation was real. Bruce Lee stood opposite him. He did not adopt a formal stance immediately. He stood almost casually, weight balanced, arms slightly down. This was not carelessness. This was one of the most advanced things about Bruce Lee's approach, the ability to look like nothing while being everything, to offer no readable posture, to show the opponent a blank page. One of the observers later described it as the most frightening thing I ever saw, and nothing had happened yet. Ali waited. He was comfortable waiting. He was famous for waiting. The rope-a-dope was years away still, but the principle was already in him. Let the other man commit, read the commit, answer it. He could wait as long as he needed to. 3 seconds passed. The room held its breath without deciding to. And then, Bruce moved. Not fully, not a committed attack. A probe, a flicker of motion toward Ali's lead leg. Something designed not to land but to provoke a reaction. Ali read it. Ali answered it. His back foot shifted, his weight transferred, his guard adjusted. It took him 0.4 seconds. In boxing terms, that is extraordinarily fast. In Bruce Lee terms, it was all the information he needed. Because here's the thing about Jeet Kune Do that makes it almost impossible to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. It doesn't fight your body. It fights your decision. By the time Ali's nervous system had processed the probe, decided on a response, and begun transmitting that response to his muscles, Bruce Lee had already read the transmission. He had already moved. He was already somewhere else. Ali's guard adjustment, that 0.4-second masterpiece of trained reflex, opened a gap the width of a human fist on his right side. It was open for less than a quarter of a second. Bruce Lee's right hand was already there. It did not land with full force. This was not a fight. This was a demonstration. The contact was controlled, deliberate, measured, enough to register but not to damage. It landed on Ali's right ribcage. Thump. Clean. Surgical. Precise. The sound was small. The silence that followed it was enormous. Ali looked down at his ribs. He looked up at Bruce. He blinked once. Nobody in the room spoke.
Someone brought water. Nobody remembered who, nobody remembered when. What they remembered was that at some point, without ceremony, without announcement, the two men simply sat down on the edge of that canvas mat, Ali with his long legs crossed at the ankle, Bruce with his knees pulled slightly forward, elbows resting on them, and the room around them seemed to exhale. The training associates drifted to the walls, the observers went quiet, and for the next 2 hours, Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee talked. Not performed, not debated, not sparred with words the way men of large egos spar when they feel threatened. Talked. The kind of talking that only happens between people who have just shown each other something real. The kind that strips the ceremony away, because ceremony suddenly seems like an insult to the moment you just shared. Ali spoke first. He said, and multiple accounts preserve this in nearly identical language, "Do that again, but slower. I want to see where I lost you." Bruce didn't smile. He didn't accept the compliment built into the request. He simply nodded, stood, and walked Ali through it, frame by frame, decision by decision. Not the movement, the logic behind the movement. He showed Ali the probe, explained what he was looking for. Not a hole in the guard. Anyone could see a hole. He was looking for the nervous system's response signature, the specific pattern of micro-adjustments that a trained fighter makes when they read a threat. Because every trained fighter has one. A signature, a tell that isn't a tell in any conventional sense, not a dropped hand, not a telegraphed shoulder, but a rhythm, a timing pattern so deeply embedded by years of training that it operates completely below conscious thought. Bruce said, "You've trained your body to respond perfectly. That's your strength. But a perfect response has a perfect timing, and perfect timing can be read." Ali was very still. He said, "So the better I am, the more predictable I am." Bruce said, "At a certain level, yes." The room processed this. Ali looked at the floor for a long moment. Then he looked up and laughed, sudden, genuine, the laugh of a man who has just been shown a beautiful and slightly infuriating truth. "Man," he said, "man." That was all. What happened next broke the room open in a different way. Ali began to talk about speed. Not his speed, his fear about speed. Something he had told almost no one. Something that lived in the quiet hours of training camps, in the dark before sleep, in the private mathematics of a fighter who understood that every year added mass to experience, but subtracted milliseconds from reflex. He was 25. He was at the absolute peak of his physical capacity. And somewhere in that peak, he had already begun to feel the edges of it. He said something close to this, and the accounts converged strongly here. "Every year I've gotten better, smarter, stronger in every way that matters in the ring. But there's one thing I feel slipping, just barely, just at the edges, and it's the thing I built everything on." He didn't say the word. He didn't need to. Bruce said it quietly, not answering, completing. "Speed." Ali nodded. One nod, slow. "I've got maybe 3 years," he said. "Maybe 4 if I'm lucky and I stay clean and I train like a monk. And then something's going to start going. Not much, a fraction. But in this business, a fraction is the whole thing." He looked at Bruce directly. "You found my timing today because I'm still close to perfect. What happens when I'm not perfect anymore? When my response signature slows down just enough to be a full read instead of a near read?" Bruce considered this. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't offer philosophy yet. He just sat with the question the way you sit with something heavy, acknowledging its weight before deciding what to do with it. Then he said, "Then you have to change what you are before that happens." Ali frowned. "What does that mean?" Bruce said, "Right now you win with speed plus skill. When the speed changes, the skill has to become something else. You have to become a different kind of dangerous, not faster, deeper." Ali said, "Deeper how?" And Bruce said something that none of the accounts render identically, but all describes as stopping the room completely. You have to make your opponent fight your mind instead of your body, because your mind doesn't age the same way. Because the man who makes you chase his intention instead of his movement, that man never slows down. He just changes what he's moving. Silence. Long silence. Ali stared at the mat.
Then he looked up and said 4 words that none of the 7 people in that room ever forgot. He said, "The rope-a-doke." Not as an announcement, not as an idea being born, as a recognition, as if something that had been forming in the dark of his mind for months had just been given a name by the pressure of this conversation. Nobody knew what he meant yet, not fully. They would, 7 years later in Kinshasa, Zaire, watching Ali absorb George Foreman's power for 7 rounds and then dismantle him in the 8th, watching Ali do exactly what he had just described, make his opponent fight an intention, a strategy, a mind, instead of a body. But in that gym in 1967, it was just 4 words and a silence, and Bruce Lee nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what Ali had just seen. The exchange went the other direction too, and this is the part of the account that surfaces most rarely, because it required Bruce Lee to be vulnerable in a way that his public image, carefully constructed, deliberately mythic, rarely allowed. Ali asked him a direct question. He said, "What's your limitation? You found mine. What's yours?" The room tensed slightly, not because they expected Bruce to deflect, but because the question was so clean, so reciprocal, so genuinely respectful, that it demanded an answer of equal weight. Bruce was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mass. Simple. Direct. No performance around it. Everything I do I've optimized for a body this size. The speed, the angles, the entry points, they all work because I am what I am. Against you, today, that strike worked because the gap was real and my hand was already moving. But in a genuine exchange, extended, you hit me once, with real intent, and the calculation changes completely." He paused. "I don't have a margin for error against someone your size. You have margins. I don't. So everything I do has to be right. Every time. Not most of the time. Every time." Ali absorbed this. Then he said, "That sounds exhausting." Bruce almost smiled. "It's clarifying." "Clarifying," Ali repeated. He tasted the word. Then, yeah, I understand that." He looked at Bruce Lee, really looked at him, the way Ali looked at opponents before fights, with that complete and unsentimental assessment, and said, "You know what you are? You're a surgeon. I don't know, a force of nature maybe, but you're a surgeon. You find the one place and you go there, only there." Bruce said, "And you're the storm that makes surgeons necessary." Ali laughed, long and real. "I'm using that," he said.
In the final hour of the conversation, it stopped being about fighting. Or rather, it became about what fighting really was, which is a different thing entirely. Ali talked about performance, about the gap between what he actually felt in the ring and what he showed the world, about how much of his public persona, the taunting, the prediction poems, the theatrical press conferences, was a weapon deployed before the first punch, about how he had figured out, years before most people understood it, that the psychological dimension of combat was not separate from the physical dimension, that they were the same thing, just expressed in different languages. He said, "I beat half my opponents before we get in the ring. I beat them in the lobby. I beat them at the weigh-in. By the time they hear the bell, there's already a version of me living rent-free in their head and taking up too much space." Bruce was nodding before Ali finished the sentence. He said, "The fight begins the moment the opponent knows you exist." Ali pointed at him. "Exactly. The best fight," Bruce continued, "is the one that's already over before it looks like it started. Not because you surprised them, because you made them doubt themselves so completely that they became their own opponent." Ali said, "Now you sound like me." Bruce said, "Or you sound like every martial philosopher who came before both of us." Ali said, "Don't take this away from me." They both laughed. There was a moment near the end, the accounts agree this happened, though they disagree on exactly when, where Ali watched Bruce perform something alone in the center of the mat. Not for the room, not even for Ali really, just moving through a series of forms at a speed that seemed to belong to a different relationship with time than the rest of the room was operating in. Fluid, violent, beautiful. The way a river is beautiful, not despite the force of it, but because of it. Ali watched without speaking for a long time. Then he said softly, to no one specific, "God was showing off when he made that man." One of the observers wrote this down. He didn't know why. He just knew it was the kind of sentence you needed to keep. The meeting ended without ceremony.
No grand declarations, no formal acknowledgement of what had just occurred. Ali stood up, stretched, that full body extension that made him look even larger, and shook Bruce's hand. Not the public handshake, the real one. Grip held one beat longer than necessary, eyes direct. Ali said, "I want to do this again." Bruce said, "You know where to find me." Ali nodded, started toward the door, stopped once, half-turned. He said, "That thing you did, where you read the response before the response happens." A pause. "Is that teachable?" Bruce said, "To the right person." Ali looked at him for one more second. Then he smiled, the smallest version of the smile, the private one, and walked out. The room stayed quiet for a long moment after the door closed. Then one of Ali's associates exhaled and said, "What just happened?" Nobody answered, because nobody had the right words yet. They never had a public meeting, no photographs, no interviews, no joint appearance that could be pointed to and analyzed and reduced to a headline. What they had instead was something rarer, a mutual respect so complete that neither man felt the need to perform it for anyone else. In subsequent years, both men referenced each other in interviews, never by name, never directly, always in the language of oblique acknowledgement. Ali once told a journalist that the fastest man he had ever encountered was not a boxer. He didn't elaborate. The journalist didn't push. Bruce Lee, in multiple conversations with students, referenced an exchange with a heavyweight who understood speed at a level that most people couldn't access. He never named him. They knew. The 7 people in that room knew. And slowly, quietly, the way all true legends migrate, not through broadcast, but through whisper, the story began to move.
What that afternoon in Los Angeles really was, stripped of every layer of mythology around it, were 2 human beings at the absolute apex of their respective disciplines, recognizing in each other something the rest of the world was still trying to understand. Not just physical mastery, philosophical mastery. The understanding that what you do with your body is only the surface expression of what you have done with your mind. That speed is not a gift, it is a decision made thousands of times over years to strip away everything slow. That power is not size, it is the complete uninterrupted alignment of intention with action, with nothing wasted in the space between. Bruce Lee spent his life trying to reach that alignment. Ali spent his life trying to reach it too, just in a different language, against different opponents, inside different boundaries. What they found in each other for 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon in a warehouse gym in Los Angeles was a mirror. The specific kind of mirror that only appears when you meet someone who arrived at the same truth from a completely different direction. The truth being this: the most dangerous thing in any fight is not the person who is strongest, not the person who is fastest, not the person who is most technically refined. The most dangerous thing in any fight is the person who has no distance between who they are and what they do. No gap, no hesitation, no moment where intention and action are separate things. Bruce Lee called it flow. Ali called it being on. The ancient martial texts called it mushin, no mind, the state where the body stops waiting for permission from thought. Both men had it. Both men knew the price of it, the 10,000 hours, the broken bones, the 4 a.m. sessions when the body said stop and the mind said no, the willingness to be wrong, to be hit, to fail quietly in gyms where no one was watching so that you could be right, publicly, when everything was on the line. Both men knew that the moment in that warehouse, that 4-second exchange, that thump against Ali's ribs, was not a victory for Bruce Lee. It was not a defeat for Muhammad Ali. It was something far more valuable than either. It was proof. Proof that the principles were real, that the philosophy worked, that the years of stripping down and rebuilding and questioning everything that everyone else accepted without question had led somewhere true. 4 seconds, 1 strike, 2 legends, and a silence that lasted decades. There is a question people ask when they hear this story. They ask, who would have won? It is the wrong question. Not because the answer is unknowable, though it is. Not because the comparison is unfair, though it is. But because it mistakes the point entirely. Bruce Lee never fought to win. He fought to be true, to express in the language of movement the most honest version of what a human body could become when it was given complete commitment, complete clarity, and complete refusal to accept the limitations that other people's imaginations tried to impose on it. He once said, and this line has been repeated so many times it has lost none of its precision, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once. I fear the man who has practiced 1 kick 10,000 times." What he meant was not a kick. He meant a principle. He meant depth over breadth, mastery over variety, the decision to know one true thing completely,
rather than to know 1,000 approximate things carelessly. Muhammad Ali understood this in his bones, even if he expressed it differently. He said, "It's not bragging if you can back it up." Different language, same philosophy. Know what you are, be it completely. Back it up without hesitation. In that Los Angeles gym, for 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon that the world never photographed and history never recorded, two men who had each built their lives on that principle found each other. They showed each other something real. They left changed. And somewhere in the legacy of both, in Ali's rope-a-dope, in Bruce Lee's intercepting fist, in every moment where a smaller truth defeated a larger assumption, the echo of that afternoon is still moving, still fast, still precise, still after everything, undefeated. The footage was never released, because there was no footage, only 7 witnesses, and a silence that speaks louder than any film.